Well, you can find parking garages just about anywhere, and while there are many different styles of parking decks, they all have one thing in common. They must adhere to engineering design standards. But who checks those facilities after they're built to make sure they remain safe? Tonight, consumer investigator Steve Sprazier digs deeper into that issue.
The parking garage. When we use it, most of us are focused on one thing, finding a place to put our vehicle.
Does it ever concern you when you come into a parking garage about how safe it might be structurally?
I've never thought of that.
I guess I don't really know what all goes into it to really think about it.
The fact is, we don't think about parking garages. We just take it for granted that they're going to be okay and structurally sound.
Take a look at a column like this. How do you know that it's safe on the inside as well as the outside? Well, we went to a place where they test them to get answers.
NC State's Constructed Facilities Lab looks at just how much abuse a component like a cement column can take. As Professor Greg Lucier explains, they do that by pushing it to the breaking point.
We're testing for failure in the laboratory to avoid failure in the real structure.
But parking structures are also exposed to the elements, and that can be problematic if water ends up getting inside of the seams or cracks where it can rust the steel reinforcing rods buried deep in the concrete.
What sort of effect does that have on a structure that's out there like a parking garage?
So exposure to moisture is a very big factor in the lifespan of any structure. You do not want moisture entering that structure and penetrating the components and the joints.
In some parts of the country, the periodic inspection of parking garages is required by law, but we found out here in North Carolina that is not the case.
The city told me there is no process in place in Raleigh where we do routine inspections of these structures after the initial certificate of occupancy. But the city says if it was told about deficiencies or structural issues, it would investigate and recommend the property owner retain an engineer if needed. It's much the same elsewhere in the state.
That would be up to the owner of the garage and their engineer and their insurance company to do those routine inspections and to make sure that their structure remains safe, just as would be the case for any other commercial building.
And for some who use parking garages, age is a factor.
It depends on how old it is. I mean, if it's really old, then I would wonder, but newer ones, they're built to standard.
Problems tend to occur as a structure grows older, but some of them can be fixed using things like this epoxy-based mortar.
Could you put this on a parking garage if they had defects in the column or whatever?
You could. Now, you would want to determine what caused the defect in the first place. If the defect was caused by corrosion of the internal steel that expanded and then popped off some of the cover concrete, you would want to clean that steel. You would want to figure out what was causing that steel to corrode.
In general, Professor Lucier says there would be signs over time that a problem with a parking deck is developing. The problems wouldn't just suddenly appear.
The surface cracks are pretty normal. If there was a really big crack, I'd be more concerned.
Next time you're in a parking garage, if you see something which concerns you, take time to report it to the structure's owner. You could be stopping a problem before it gets worse. Working for you, I'm consumer investigator Steve Sprazier.